Hello, my most amazing artists. I wanted to pop on here and show you how to use watercolor pencils. Watercolor pencils are one of my favorite art materials. I love that you can use them as a colored pencil, and then I love that you can add water and have them turn into paint. What I want to explain is when I was coloring, what I usually would try to do. For instance, for the sky, I used my blue, and then I actually used red at first because I didn't realize I had these other pencils. I used only blue and red because blue and red I knew would make purple. But then I realized I did have another really nice purpley color, and I had a dark blue and a light blue. So I added all of those colors into my sky to see what would happen when I overlapped my colors. Usually when colors are next to one another on the color wheel, when they're analogous colors, it's just next to each other on the color wheel, they could blend really nicely. Another color scheme that works well together and blends really nicely is when you have one color and tints and shades of that color. That is called monochromatic. You have one color and tints and shades of the color. So for my greens, when I was working with my greens, I also overlapped different shades of my greens as well for my plants. So let's see what happens when we add water. I have a big brush for my big areas and small brushes for my small areas. I think I'm gonna work from the top to the bottom, and I actually always use and work on the lightest colors first, just so when my brush or the water, if it gets dirty, it doesn't get the other colors dirty. So what I'm doing is I'm first adding water. To my sun. Now I can see that this paper doesn't love water as much as I hoped it would. If you were using a watercolor paper, this would work much better. So that is what I'm gonna do first. I actually mentioned I was gonna do the sky first, but I lied. I think I'm gonna go back since my water is clean and do my lion first. So I'm gonna do all the lightest colors first. And you can see all I'm doing is just adding water to the colored pencils, and they're turning into a paint. Probably not as well as I hoped it would, and I think that's because of the paper, but it's definitely turning into a paint. When you use paint, I know that before you pick your next color, you clean your brush. So you want to do the same thing when you're using the watercolor pencils. Before you go ahead and wet another color, you always want to clean your brush. So I'm cleaning my brush now because I'm going to then go ahead and do the inside of my line. Always making sure to clean my brush. There's actually a lot of noise going on at my house today. My dog is barking, and I could hear people graduating. Right in my backyard, I can hear people graduating from the university, which is very cool. And every time I run out of water, I just go back and add water to my brush. I'm using a small brush for small areas and a large brush for large areas. So far in class, we worked on our Henri Rousseau jungle artwork, and you are probably up to the point right now where you need to add a little bit of water to your watercolor pencils. And this is what you want to do. I think next I will do the Lotus Flower. When I colored these in, I made sure to do dark at the edges and then light on the inside to create value. value is an element of art. And value is just using the lights and the darks of color. Now I'm going to use a larger brush for my sky. Oh, you know what I'm going to do? Speaking of light colors and doing all the light colors first, or I'm actually doing all the warm colors first, I'm going to do my oranges just because I don't want the water to get dirty. I have to be a little careful because when I was doing my oranges, I got a little bit of my blue sky on it, and orange and blue are across from each other on the color wheel. So when orange and blue mix, they make a duller hue. So you have to be careful of that. All right, now I'm going to start from top to bottom with my sky. And all I'm doing is I'm getting lots of water and I'm adding it. And you can actually see this turning into paint a little bit more than what you've been able to probably witness so far. All I'm doing is just going back and forth. I'm going in the same direction and adding my water to my sky. And you can see it really starts to come alive when you do this. I actually don't know what kind of paper I chose for this. I think I might have picked something that was a scrap of paper, and it's not doing as well as our normal paper that we use. So yours actually might even work a little bit better than this. But you can still see it is working. The colors are mixing very nicely, and I'm sure this is going to dry really well too. Sometimes when our artwork's dry, then it looks a little better. And sometimes when our artwork gets curly, when it dries, sometimes when our wet artworks dry the edges and it gets a little curly. So I usually put them underneath something very heavy, like some books or some other art supplies that are heavy, just to flatten them out a bit. You could go in one direction with the color, or you could also make tiny little circles. Here I'm just kind of making tiny little round circles as I paint, just to be careful for my edges. And I'm going to do some here. Tiny circles. And I'm going to do some here and in here. Be careful, because if you have browns, they can get your other colors a little muddy if you're not careful. Because I used brown and I can see it's picking it up. So I'm making sure to be very, very careful in and around the darker areas. Next up, I think I'm going to do, actually, let me do this first. I'm going to get the brown tree. I added a little bit of yellows to it, and my branches, just to get done with that whole area. And I'm going to do the leaves to the orange leaves, not the orange leaves, the green leaves. Silly me. Add a little bit of water to those as well, so I'm done the whole top of my picture, and that could all dry. Now I'm working into the middle ground of my picture, doing the mountain. When I colored my mountains in, I decided to make a purple mountain to give my artwork a little bit more color. And you can see how all of the brush strokes are now turning into paint. And so this will happen for you as well when you're working on your project. Remember, the most important thing to do when you are adding your water is to dip your brush in the water before each new color. I'm cleaning my brush every single time I touch a new color with my brush. This way, I keep my colors nice and vibrant. I'll go down here. I want to do this whole middle groundy kind of area. And then I'll come back and paint all the leaves that are in the foreground. This area. All right, friends. I think you can see how I'm doing this and what you need to do, because my video is getting a little long at this point, and there's only a certain amount of time to create a video. And since I'm not speeding this one up and I'm working in real time, there's not tons of time. I might work for a little bit longer, see how much I can finish. But YouTube usually allows only 15 minutes. So we're getting close. But I'm sure from this video, you can see what you need to do. Try to always keep my brush going in the same direction. When I was doing the sky, I was going this way. But now that I'm doing this area, I'm kind of just going up and down, just because that's the way the gradient kind of feels to me, that it kind of blends better up and down. Whoa, you can see what I did. I forgot to clean my brush, and see that green went right into my purple. Now, luckily, those are both cool colors, and so it's not terrible. But if that was two complementary colors, for instance, blue and orange, that might have not worked out so well. But that's okay. Sometimes we make mistakes, and we just have to work through them. All right, I'm gonna add a little bit of water here to my lime. I'm gonna get my snake plant next. Adding a little water. I use lots and lots of different tints and shades on my snake plant. You can see I used a lot of different colors. Well, a lot of different shades of green in here. And I was pressed really, really hard on some of the areas too. When we color, if you want to create what is called atmospheric perspective, that is when things are darker up front, and then in the background things appear a little lighter. That's what I kind of tried to do a little bit with this bottom grassy area. As you can see down here, it's pretty dark, and you can see the green, how it's coming in pretty dark. And then I try to make it a little lighter as it got back here, just to kind of show a sense of space and depth. Space is another element of art. When we create space in an artwork, our artwork has a foreground, which is in the front, a middle ground, which is in the middle, and then some kind of background. When you do that, that unifies your composition and creates an interesting artwork. We are actually going to make it on time. I'm wrapping it up. I'm gonna add a little tiny bit of water to these leaves right here. And now you can see that, my friends, is how watercolor pencils work. I hope you enjoy working with them as much as me. And until next time, friends, stay creative.